And welcome to everybody. My name is Tony Schufo. I'm the Director of Sales for Control Consultants. And welcome to the JACE8000 EDGE10 demo and training. I'm sure you'll find some very interesting items today that will be of great value to you, that we as a partner with VYKON will be able to support you on. So I look forward to hearing you in the future. So basically the two guest speakers that we have today is Roxette Mancero Sanchez and James Johnson. And they're going to take us through a variety of information, and we'll have a Q&A session after, where you can answer or request your questions via our Q&A system, if you will. So here's some ground rules. We're going to be doing about 45 minutes presentation, and then at the end, that's what we'll handle the questions. In addition to that, if you have more questions or you need more support, by all means, don't hesitate to reach out to me and my team. We'll be happy to support you and get you the information you need to benefit from the VYKON JACE discussion we're having today. So that being said, I'd like to turn this over to Roxette and get going. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tony. I appreciate it. Good morning, everybody. My name is Roxette Mancero Sanchez, and I'm going to be presenting for you this morning. My presentation is going to be a high-level overview of the JACE8000 and the EDGE10 controller, and then I will be handing it over to James Johnson, who will handle the technical demo of this. So let's get started. Like I said, if you have any questions, throw them into the Q&A or in the chat, and we will get to them at the end. So just to briefly reintroduce VYKON, VYKON is Tritium's house brand of the JACE8000 controller and the EDGE10. It is a native Niagara controller. So when you're talking about doing your logic, creating your schedules, alarms, graphics, everything you're doing it in native Niagara without additional apps or tools to download and work with. So you just learn native Niagara to get everything in. It is completely agnostic when it comes as far as putting this on top of another system. VYKON does not care what brand, what protocol, same as Niagara, what generation of a system you may have. We pride ourselves in connecting and controlling anything that we can get our hands on. Now, VYKON and through Tritium is sold through channel distribution like CCI. So we work with our partners to go through that distribution channel where they can support, they stock, and they help us out with anything that we need to do. And we have no territory restrictions. So that's another really nice part about this, is that we fully go through anywhere you are, we are able to help you. We don't restrict any of our partners to specific regions. When we're talking about the JACE8000, the JACE stands for Java Application Control Engine, and it really is just the network area controller. The whole purpose of the JACE8000 is to integrate. You can do simple integrations or comprehensive integrations, and it gives you that single pane of glass where you're able to look at everything from one place. And that's really important, because when we're talking about engineers or our techs and folks that are managing multiple systems, they've got to learn different systems. They've got to be able to keep up to date with every new revision of every system software, any new apps that they're using, and we're minimizing that. The nice part about this is too, we want to connect to different systems. Oops, sorry, I went back a slide. We're connecting systems, we're creating algorithms and analytics that you're able to utilize. And since we're combining all these systems, you can make better business decisions. You're able to view and monitor alerts with the alarm console, and you're able to control your systems from anywhere in the world, because we're using a web browser interface to change logic if you're needing to do commissioning on the fly. Now, that being said, we do have to have a very strong posture for IP. This means that we are standardizing with a lot of IT protocols. We are also one of the only companies that the Department of Defense utilizes, because our encryptions and our IT infrastructure is meeting their standards. So keep that in mind as we're moving forward in the industry and everything is modernizing. This is a really great example of what we can do with JACEs. This by no means is everything we can do with a JACE. So the most popular that we've seen are going to be HVAC, lighting, central plant, when we're literally taking any system that you have and pulling it into the JACE. The JACE8000 does something called normalizing with the data. So it's taking the points for what they are. It does not matter what brand, it doesn't care about anything except for what those points are doing in that controller, in that device, in that system, and it's pulling it into one place. When we're talking about metering, there's a lot of really great apps that you can use for metering, where we have a tenant billing app through the VYKON channel where you can bill tenants based on however many meters they have. You're able to import and export with third-party invoicing systems, third-party data, get alarms and information that way. Safety and access are becoming more and more prevalent in the world, especially as things get more modern. So you're able to pull that into a JACE as well. And even some applications, you can have your security systems and a simple HVAC in a JACE. Sensors are getting put everywhere. Occupancy, level sensors, light sensors, motion sensors, things like that. You're able to also pull in. If you can put a sensor on something, you can monitor it. And it's not just monitoring it, but it's making better business decisions. With refrigeration and VRF, especially in the retail spaces, a lot of these companies are large and have locations that stretch out over wide regions. This is perfect for a VYKON or Niagara integration because there's no territory restrictions, and there are over thousands of partners that we can utilize and that are available to service those places. Another fun one is power generation, another huge, but a fun one is elevators. So we can pull elevators into the Niagara platform utilizing a JACE8000 controller, and you're able to see what those elevators are doing and make preventative maintenance calls, kind of see the wear and tear on equipment and things like that. When we're moving into the bigger picture, it is talking about putting everything under one platform, which is the Niagara framework, pulling that in, being able to see that from your phone, from your tablet, from your laptop, whether it's Android or Apple or whatever brand you may have, it's being able to pull that information in. And then as the industry is moving to the cloud, you're able to also take all that information and use whatever cloud service you're utilizing. With that being said, we use drivers like the MQTT drivers. We have the JSON toolkits that help make that happen. So this is a great example of some of the cloud services that we are already working with. If there are others, or if you have any ideas, please don't hesitate to reach out to us or the CCI team, and we can talk about everything. So some of the drivers that are included within what we offer in the JACE8000 and within the drivers and supervisor levels are these. A lot of these you may be familiar with already. That's going to be a BACnet driver, your LAN driver, Modbus drivers, MQTT, which is that querying and texting kind of messaging that goes in between offerings. Then we have SNMP drivers. On the supervisors, there's a couple of drivers as well here that are more database drivers. And then we have a couple of JACE driver options. That means that we're able to connect to different types of equipment, like McQuay drivers, American Auto Matrix, Andover Infinity drivers. So this is just an example of some of the tools that we are able to use to literally complete that connection and connectivity to any device and being able to offer that to our channel. So now with the EDGE10 controller, this is a 10-point IP-based field equipment controller that runs the Niagara framework at the edge. When we're talking about the edge, we're talking about being at the edge, being where the smart thermostats are, being where your equipment is in that building, and being able to control in that floor, in that building, things like that. Now the industry has moved, so we made thermostats smart. We started adding sensors everywhere, and now we can do everything that is in Niagara essentially in that EDGE10 controller. The VYKON EDGE10 controller, it's a single tool infrastructure. So the nice part about this is that you're able to create smarter, more efficient systems and include that world-class security in one small controller that is native Niagara as well. So you're not learning a whole nother system. You're not learning another app or having to download a tool or another feature to be able to utilize this EDGE10 controller. You're utilizing native Niagara. Now, this can be used for rooftop units, fan coils, single stage air handling units. There are templates in the EDGE10 controllers that you can use, application templates, you can use graphical templates, anything that you can deploy to make it easier to utilize. It is a BACnet over IP controller, and it can be in the trunk within other controllers as well. So some of these, I've got two examples of some of the graphics that can be created here within that EDGE10 controller. And then it's just 10 points of IO. So if we revert back to a couple of slides before, it was showing those EDGE10 controllers alongside the JACE8000, because in some situations, you are able to use an EDGE10 controller in lieu of a JACE8000. And the nice part about that is that there are no SMAs and you don't have to select point counts or device counts. So there's no licensing with the EDGE10 controller, which is really nice. Depending on the application that you're using, it can be very cost effective and competitive for you. Now, in the EDGE10 controller as well, you're able to create all of your logic and graphics in the wire sheets, but you're also able to do alarming, history, schedules, and many tools and features available that way. There are definitely a couple of classes, or you're able to hop on to Tridium University and learn more about the EDGE10, or we can set something up with a group at CCI. Now, something also that we have here is a little comparison and little tools that we have between the EDGE network and the ACE network. So the ACE network is an asynchronous control engine application. It became available in Niagara 4.8. We are currently at 4.11 and 4.12 is coming out soon. We have the EDGE network, which became available with the EDGE10 at 4.7. The EDGE controllers are fully commissioned direct from the factory. So you're basically ready to get rock and rolling and start putting your points in and start controlling your systems. They are expandable, so you're able to add IO 34 or 16s, but you do need power supplies for the 16s. And the nice part about the EDGE network is that for these equipment controllers, the EDGE tools make it really easy to upgrade application templates. So you're able to easily change whatever application you're doing and change those templates or change that logic to make them work. Within the EDGE network, you also are able to use the ACE network, which basically gives you the availability to create logic and make changes without having your controller be shut down. When we're talking about time, when a system is down, you have to get it up as quick as possible. The ACE network and the EDGE network allow you to do this. Instead of being down for over a minute and having equipment down and your tenants be concerned and your tenants losing money and things like that, you're able to do that within seconds. So we've shrunk that time period, which can make a really big difference within money and losses. And at the end of the day, that's a big part of it is saving money and making things easier for everyone to use. So with that being said, that does end my demo portion of this, and I'm going to send it over to James Johnson, who is our VYKON technical support, Tridium technical support here on the team. James has a lot of years of knowledge and expertise in this, and he also teaches our VYKON Pro class, which you could reach out to CCI for. We have a VYKON Pro class coming up July 11th through 15th, so please keep that in mind. But with that being said, please, James, take it away.
All right. Thanks, Roxette. I appreciate that. And I'll go ahead and share my screen there. Somebody just confirm they're seeing my workbench.
Yes, we see it.
Okay, thank you, Rachel. All right, so I want to take a little bit of time here to talk about the EDGE controllers themselves, and just hold this up. Maybe you can see this is the form factor of the EDGE controller, where across the top, it's the same footprint as a JACE. Across the top, we have universal inputs, analog outputs, RS-45 connection, and our digital outputs as well. And on the bottom side, you have the dual Ethernet ports and the power connection. Now, as Roxette mentioned, these EDGE controllers come out of the factory fully commissioned, and as such, It's a little bit different than the JACE controllers. And if you look underneath, I'm not sure how well you can see that, but looking underneath the cover, also on the back side of the controller, and also on the packaging that the controller comes in, there's stickers which give information on the MAC addresses and what the default IP address will be. If you connect these into a network with a DHCP server, though, they're automatically going to pick up a DHCP address as well. And in my case, in this lab environment that I do have a DHCP server connected, and I'm able to set up some MAC address reservations on the IP addresses and everything as well, which would be the ideal situation in a production network, for example. Now, this particular edge controller here, the EDGE10, is just straight out of the box from the factory. And if I log in with those default platform credentials, what we'll see is I'll get prompted to approve a host exception because it's using a default self-signed certificate. And then also I'll get prompted here to go through the change defaults wizard. In other words, we want you to go through and set a unique passphrase. We want you to set unique platform credentials and that sort of thing. Now, in this case, I'm just going to leave this edge controller alone for the time being. But I also want to point out that if I connect to the station on it, similarly, I'm going to get a self-signed certificate exception. And then there's a default user named admin, and the password on that, the default is admin12345 with a capital A. Now, when you attempt to log in with that user, you're going to be prompted to change the password because of a cybersecurity perspective. We want to make sure that you're not using default credentials in the station or anything. For the time being, I'm just going to hit cancel there and leave this edge controller alone in an uncommissioned state, because I kind of want to talk about utilizing provisioning here in a few minutes about how we can provision this. Now, this edge controller here, I have connected to it, and I've changed the default platform credentials and the passphrase, and I've also changed the default admin password as well. And I just want to show you what these default stations look like. So it comes commissioned, at least with Niagara 4.7 version, and it has a default station loaded in it. All of them will have the same station loaded into it. Standard services and drivers will be here. Each station will have a unique station name based on the host ID of the edge controller, and it will have a unique IP address either through DHCP or using its static fallback addressing. So if I were to plug 10 or 50 of these on a network, I would still expect them all to have unique IP addresses and unique station names. So this default station has what we call the Edge IO network, and the Edge IO network is similar to the NRIO network. It has a local device with a points container, and when you discover those points, what you're going to see are those default 10 points that exist in the Edge controller itself: 5 universal inputs, 2 analog output, and 3 digital outputs. And we can configure these points the same way we would with NRIO, for example, and you would go through and configure that station however you want to. Now, kind of like the cooking show, I'm showing you this is how it looks out of the box, and I'm going to connect to this other edge controller I have here, where I've gone into that default station. It still has that unique station name based on the host ID, and I went in and actually mapped in a couple of points into the Edge IO network here. So when I did the discover, I just mapped in UI1 and called it space temperature, and mapped in DO1 and so forth. So as far as programming goes here, you would go through just normal wire sheet programming, using objects from kit control and so forth. And I might, program some logic where if the space temperature is above some set point, it's going to turn on the digital output to control an exhaust fan. And all this programming is just standard wire sheet programming like you would normally do, whether it was a NRIO network or the Edge network. And as Roxette mentioned, we can expand the IO on this controller simply by adding an NRIO network to the controller and mapping in the NRIO points and doing all the programming the normal way that we would. So the idea with Edge controllers, though, is that we're really creating an application specific controller, or we're trying to meet some repetitive need. I have a fan coil unit controller, or I have a small air handler or rooftop application or something along those lines. So in order to help you with your engineering efforts and speed up the processes, Once you've developed this application, and let's just say this application in this edge controller is my, perfect application to do whatever I'm trying to do. Then I simply right click on the config node here, and there's a template submenu, and we're going to make an application template here. And what this will do is it's going to launch this wizard, which is going to allow me to create this application template. And maybe this is my exhaust fan control or whatever. And I can give it a file name and a title here. And you can change the vendor. We can also change the versioning, which I'll talk about here in just a few minutes. But basically, the template will either be in a draft state where I'm editing it, preparing it, or in a ready state, and it allows me to increment the version, which helps me with version control. And you can give it a description, and also you could have additional notes in here that might be, initial design or whatever, or you can put notes in there about modifications you've made and so forth. On the component tab, what you'll see is this is the root of the station. And if you're familiar with device or component templates, the application template is a little bit different. It's kind of a hybrid between a station template and a device or component template. What you'll notice in particular is if I expand the services tree here, there's certain services that will have a red badge on the icon. And I'm not sure how easy that may be to see in the presentation, but like the job service, for example, or the authentication service, the Fox service, the history service, the template service, the web service. These are all core services that have to be in the station in order to utilize application templates. Everything that's marked with a green badge are optional components that can be removed or configured. And you'll notice the driver's component itself is also green, and even the Niagara network and the Edge network are all green, meaning these things can all be removed or altered. But we have some core services that are required to work with an application template. So you can modify all these properties here. We also have configuration properties where, let's say, for example, I have a Niagara network connection that I want to make back to a JACE or a supervisor. Then maybe I define a Niagara station underneath the Niagara network, and I have configuration properties that might be the IP address of the supervisor or the connection user password and things of that nature. So we can set up these configuration properties, which are just unique properties that need to be set each time that application template is deployed to a controller. And then there's also a graphics tab where you can go through and add graphics to components or edit the graphics and that sort of thing. So the idea here is once you've set all the properties up, I might change it to a ready state and change the version, and then I would save that template file. Now, application templates get saved to the application templates subfolder under your user home. So if I'll take a look in my tree over here under my user home, so station templates is where station templates would be. And then I also have a templates folder, which is where I would see NTPL files, which would be like component templates or device templates. But we also have this application templates folder, and this is where we'll see those NAPL files. There is a little difference in the extension there, the NAPL versus NTPL. Just wanted to draw some difference there visually to those template files and make sure they're not confused, and that's why they have different locations as well. Now, I can show you, for example, looking at this application template, which is also an edge controller. This application template has an Edge IO network with a bunch of different points that have been mapped into it, and different wire sheet logic, which we could always take a look at the wire sheet here, and I could make modifications to wire sheet logic and things of that nature. And this one has graphics that are assigned to the edge local edge device and things of that nature. What I've done here is I really just duplicated this NAPL file and changed the extension to zip. And if I expand that, what we'll see is that there inside of the NAPL file, there is a template bog file. And this template bog file is that root station object, which has all of our services and our drivers configured and everything. So this is an actual partial bog file that's encapsulated in that application template. Also inside the application template are things like these PX files and any images that are used in the PX files. And we also have a manifest XML file here. This is the same as a device template or a component template. This is giving us a unique ID for the template, what my versioning is, and other information. It includes information about all those resources like PX files and images. And it also has dependencies as far as what software is required to install this application template on a edge controller. So the idea is that once you have created an application template and it's something that you want to deploy, you can take an edge controller like this Edge 3 here, which right now still just has the default station under it with nothing really configured in it. I can right click on the config, go to the templates, and in this case, instead of making the application template, I can choose to install the application template. And this will then look under, by default, under the application templates folder under my user home, which I can change that directory if I needed to. And then I can select an application template that I wanted to deploy to this controller. And then I'll click next. And in this case, it's going to prompt me to do a backup of the edge controller because I'm going to wipe out the station that's in the edge controller currently. And I want to make sure that if you want to back up what's there existing, you can. If you don't need to, then you just say, I don't need to do the backup, and we'll click the next button. Tells me, hey, I'm not going to do a backup, and we're ready to do installation. Now, installing an application template is a bit more like open heart surgery compared to the station copier, where station copier will shut the station down. Missing property. All right, I had a problem here deploying this template, and this is what it'll look like when that happens. So I'll talk a little bit about what the process was here, and then I can try to deploy one of the other application templates real quickly, actually. So what you'll see is as it starts to deploy, it's going to copy the application template out to the edge controller, and then it's going to go through and it's going to clear the old system out. It's going to clear the old application. So what it does is it'll go through and it'll remove all of those optional components out of the station, and it just leaves the core services running. Once it finishes that process, it'll then copy back in all of the things from the new application template. So it doesn't ever stop the station stays running. So obviously, in order to deploy an application template, you have to already have a commissioned piece of hardware that has Niagara running, that has a station on it with compatible software, right? So it went through and added everything. Now, I ran into an issue configuring the application template here, but it did install that application. So now if I look at the local device here, you'll see, for example, all these points exist in the edge controller at this point, and all that wire sheet logic is now in the controller and that sort of thing. It did have an issue trying to finish up with the configuration properties in that case. So I want to talk a little bit more. Well, we are somewhat time limited, so I'm not going to focus on that exception there, but I'll go in and talk a little bit about the ACE engine that Roxette mentioned. Now, the ACE engine is sort of jokingly a high-speed, low-drag application if you're a racing fan. So it's a C++ application that runs in parallel with Niagara on the edge controller. And when we want to build edge applications in your workbench, there's tools, and similar to a new station, there's a new ACE app that you can click on. And this is going to, let you put a name in here, my test app one or whatever, and it's going to save it under the ACE subfolder under your user home. And it will open that up also. So it saves it under user home here under the ACE subfolder. So it saves this ACE application file here. And you'll notice that this has a little bit different colored background to differentiate it from a normal wire sheet. When we're programming in these ACE applications, instead of using the palettes and using like the kit control palette or something like that, we can't drop these components into the ACE wire sheet. Instead, you're going to use this ACE catalog sidebar. And if I look at kit control here, and for example, I look at the HVAC folder, there's going to be a similar HVAC folder in the ACE catalog. And For example, there's a loop point in kit control, and there's a loop point in the ACE catalog, and there's a T-stat block in kit control. There's a T-stat in the ACE catalog. So the main thing is that you're going to be using these components here to build up your ACE application. And we have different folders here. For example, ACE IO. These would be used to define the inputs and outputs that are the onboard IO for the edge controller. Or ACE NRIO is used to define the NRIO devices and points that might be controlled, connected to the ACE controller. And then we also have like these other subfolders that contain logic like ands and nots and ors and math blocks and you know, other HVAC blocks and things of that nature. I'll show you an ACE application here that is really basic, but I have built up. So basically there's a services folder, and inside of this services folder, there's some services here, communication service. There's a comm loss component that helps me determine whether the ACE application is communicating with the Niagara station or not. I can use that to do some fallback logic in my application. Also, I have a logic folder here that I've put some components into, and you can see in this case, I have an input, which is reading UI1 from the controller, and I'm linking that into a conversion block, which is going to convert the resistance into some space temperature reading. That's linked into a T-stat block here with a set point block, and it gives me, and I'm linking that to a digital output to control a fan. So similar to that ACE Edge application that I was showing you just a few minutes ago. Now, when I look at this Edge controller, there's the Edge IO network, and we also have an ACE network as well. So if I look in my palette, there's an ACE Edge network. Now, these two networks are mutually exclusive because they both want to control the onboard IO on the controller, and we can only have one driver controlling that IO. So if I want to change this out to utilize the ACE engine instead of the Edge IO network, the first thing I would want to do is actually delete this Edge IO network from the station, and then I can add an ACE network. I don't have the ACE module on that one. I guess we're going to do it on this one over here. So we'll go in here and delete this. So obviously I would need to install that module, which came out in 4.8. The Edge network is mutually exclusive. If I tried to add them both, then the second one I added would be in fault. Similar to the ACE or to the Edge IO network, there's a local device, and it has a points container under it. Now, this is a little bit different though, because we want to load this ACE application onto the Edge controller. And the way we do that is by right-clicking on the local device under the ACE network, and then there's an ACE application menu. I can view an app that's running in the controller. I can download an app to the controller, upload the app from the controller, or trigger the controller to save its app. So I'm going to download this app, and I'm going to go pick my first app here, which is the one that I was showing you offline in the workbench just a moment ago. And this will go ahead and download those C++ files to the controller. Once it downloads, it asks me if I want to view that app. And what you'll notice is this app component gets dynamically built under the local device. And this is showing me the application in the controller. It's not offline, it's actually online. And I can see actual values of the components and what they're doing. Now, I don't have an actual, in this case, I don't have an actual sensor connected to UI1. So it's just reading an open circuit. But when you're working with these, you do have actions here that we could do an override. And I can say, this is 10K ohm is my input value, for example. And you'll see a 10K ohm input to my conversion block gives me 77 degrees out. And then my set point is 72. So my output on the digital output here will be true than the output slot. You can also override the outputs here directly. So you can do overrides on inputs and outputs when you're looking at that ACE application. Now, inside of that control network here, this ACE Edge network, this is just helping me visualize what is occurring in that C++ application that's running on the controller in parallel. if I want to bring some of that into the station for visualization, that's where I would go under the points container of that ACE Edge Network local device. And I can do a discover here, which is going to go find all those components in my ACE application. And then I can expand these and pick points that I want to expose into the Niagara station here, so that then I could build a graphic. So for example, I can bring in my space temperature value, or I could go, bring in the fan output here, my digital output on the fan. I could bring that in as a Boolean point. And I would be able to do overrides and things of that nature as well. I can bring in the different set point blocks and things of that nature and build a graphic up. So from the Niagara side, you're handling the supervisory level function like scheduling and graphics and trending and things like that, where that C++ engine runs at a very high speed. It executes at a 50 millisecond frequency. So that's why I say high speed, low drag. It's a deterministic control engine. It starts up very quickly, like probably within 15 or 20 seconds of the edge controller getting power. That ACE application is reading the inputs and controlling the outputs based on whatever application you have loaded into it. Now, when you include ACE in the application and you build an application template of that, that ACE application will be included in the NAPL files as well. So what I mean by that is if I make a template, an application template of this controller, and I'm just going to set this to ready here and give it a version. I'm not going to make any modifications. I just want to save it so that I can go take a look at that file. So if I look under my user home at my application templates here, it just saved this NAPL file here under my application template. So I'm just going to duplicate this and I'll change the extension here to .zip just so that I can look at the internals. And what you'll notice here is in this case, it does include this ACE folder, which has my ACE application in it and some configuration files. So if you are utilizing ACE engine with your application template design, then that gets included in there as well. All right, so the last thing I want to talk about real quickly with a few minutes I have left is what I've shown you is connecting directly to these edge controllers and onesie twosie going through and setting the new passphrase, changing the default platform credentials, changing the default admin account password, installing an application template or things of that nature. If you have multiple devices that you want to deploy, then one of the things that you can do is utilize provisioning. And in order to do that, I'm not going to go into all the details of how to utilize provisioning, but what I would do is I would go into the Niagara network and I would add a new controller, which would be an edge station controller, which is really the same thing as a Niagara station, but we have a 10-to-1 licensing ratio if you're using the edge stations versus a Niagara station. So in that case, you'd want to pick an edge station. And you would just define that edge station. So I've done that here. For example, I've called this Air Handler 11, and you see the icon's a little bit different. It's connecting to this edge2.training.lan would be my intention. And that controller is the one which is still at defaults, right? It has the default username and password for the platform and for the station. So I would come in here and just put in admin 12345. I would put in the default Tritium and Niagara for the password and for the platform connection. Now, I really need to make this, make all these default changes and that sort of thing. So utilizing provisioning, what we can do is set up a provisioning job here, which is what I have set up here. And I'll just try to talk through real quickly about what this job is going to do. So initially, what I want to do at the top up here is probably enable bootstrap mode. What that will do is it's going to allow the supervisor to connect to the edge controller, even though it's using a self-signed certificate without having to go approve host exceptions. And even though it's using default platform credentials and default passphrase and all that sort of thing. So it's a special mode to help with this provisioning. Then I might want to run an update license job step as well. And that's just going to get an updated license. Roxette mentioned there's no SMA on these controllers, But when new Niagara versions come out, and it's really not that there's not SMA, it's just the SMA is perpetual. When you look at the license, it goes out to the year 9999. So when new versions come out, there might be new features that I want to leverage. And that's the reason for updating the license. There's other job steps here to change the default platform credentials, to change the default password on the admin user, and to set the passphrase. So that's going to go through and set all those security steps that you would need to do if you were manually provisioning. We can also rename the station in that edge controller. So instead of it being some funky name based on the host ID, it would rename it to be AHU11 in this case, which is the name of the device that I have here. It can also set up the reciprocal connection back to the supervisor, the Niagara network connection, set up NTP on the edge controller. And then I can go through and generate an actual certificate, sign that certificate, set the web service and Fox service to use that trusted certificate. I can install a certificate into the trust store and so forth. And then if I'm really trying to be good about cybersecurity, I might add a new user called system admin and make the Niagara network connection use that. We can update the software to 4.11, and then I can even install an application template onto that edge device, and then maybe even clean up and remove, say, the admin user, since that's a known account from the cybersecurity risk. So the idea here is I can plug all this together or plug all the devices on the network without actually doing anything to them physically. They pick up a DHCP address. Maybe I have the MAC address reservation set up with the DHCP, and then that allows me to just run this provisioning job, which would go through the steps of doing all the provisioning for me. So if I have more than one controller, that's definitely a good thing to do. All right. So that pretty much wraps up what I wanted to show there. And I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing here and turn things back over to Rachel and Tony.
Thank you so much, James. Okay, real quick, we have a couple more minutes left for Q&A. If you would like to ask a question to one of our panelists now's the time. We have a chat box as well as a Q&A toolbox down below. Feel free to type in your questions. If not, then we'll go ahead and start closing out for the remainder of this session. So with that being said, does anyone have questions? And if so, feel free to type now. If not, then I will turn it over to Tony to close us out. So I'm not seeing anything come through, which means we'll go ahead and I'm going to share my screen real quick. And if something comes to mind, because we do have a few more minutes, then we'll take a pause. But for now, we'll just go ahead and close out. Tony, do you mind going ahead and filling in our audience with what's to come and moving forward?
Absolutely, Rachel. Thank you to all. I also want to thank Roxette and James for some great information here. If you do have questions that pop up, by all means, do not hesitate to give us a call. Call me directly, and our team will work with you to get those questions answered. I hope this was helpful. This is one of a number or a series of events or webinars that we're having. So I wanted to share with you just a couple of events that are coming up that might be of great value to you. One that's coming up pretty soon is a VYKON Pro Skills Niagara for Enterprise Training session. And we're fortunate enough to have James Johnson spearheading that as well. We would love you to come, and we'll be sending you out an invite. By all means, it's July 11th, and also the invite will give you a detail as to what the subjects contain, but it's pretty detailed, and I think you'll get some great benefit of it. Secondly, lastly, if you will, as I mentioned, we're doing events like this regularly. We have a third one, and we're going to continue to be doing these events. One a webinar that's coming up is one specifically on analytics, and we're going to be doing that in the third quarter. So be on the lookout for an invite. with some more details. It'll be done by a gentleman by the name of Kevin Majek. And I'm sure, that will be some interesting topics and some things that you might find of value in your daily activity. So having said that, unless there's any other questions or any other things that have popped up since my start here, I really want to thank everybody for taking their time out of their busy schedule. With the VYKON product line and what we've been presenting here, we're excited to offer you solutions that are cutting edge and solutions that would provide you and your customers and your clients some great opportunities for future building controls and so forth. So thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Be on the lookout for a survey following this. I really appreciate everyone joining us today. Everyone have a great rest of your day. Take care.